Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Mansour Borji, who is the executive director of Article 18, which has been working on religious freedom, particularly in Iran. And he is Iranian from Iran, has been there many times, was born there, as I said. And this is the subject of the day. Mansour, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, David. It's great to speak with you and also all the people that are listening to us. Hope this will be a productive and informative discussion.
Tell us a little bit about Article 18, how that began, and the work that you do there.
Yes, actually, the name triggers a lot of questions for people, and that was intentional for us to make people ask what Article 18 is all about. It was not known to myself as mostly engaged in pastoral work and theological education, but the reality on the ground in Iran forced me and some of my colleagues to engage in human rights advocacy when specifically in 2008 there was a proposal, a bill was going to the Iranian parliament penalizing apostasy with death. And that's when we realized something really serious is about to happen, and with the help of some friends in other Christian human rights organizations, we raised awareness. There was a public outcry, and Iran, which is a signatory to International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, which is one of the main human rights documents, and should respect the right to religious freedom, including conversion, was now violating that very openly within its laws. So this suddenly became a huge international outcry. The Iranian government realized this. They cannot play as an international player while they're violating the playbook. So they withdrew that article from the law, and that gave us as Christians, but also other religious minorities, a boost, realizing that how significant it is to hold accountable states like Iran to their international obligation, and also the power of advocacy. This wouldn't come about without the support of many ordinary Christians, people of goodwill, who realized the risk that this could pose. So yeah, that's how it all started, and since then we've been documenting any right violations against Christians in Iran. Also, it's our desire to do the same thing for other religious minorities, but it's just restrains on resources and people. Otherwise, we'd like to see in Iran where this particular article from both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also this international covenant to be respected and fully practiced.
So tell me a little bit about your background. You were born in Iran. Your family's from Iran. Tell me about your experience in Iran personally.
Yes, I mean for many people, Iran has been heard. The name has been heard on the news for probably wrong reasons, and most of the time to do with the tensions in the region. But prior to 1979 revolution, it was a very thriving country, and very modernized in many senses. Iranians have a very specific identity markers, and that distinguishes them from other countries in the region. Like for people hearing Iraq and Iran, it's quite similar in tone, but it's different. I think there was a country singer in the US who had this song in early 2000 about, I don't know the difference between Iraq and Iran. But in reality, the ethnic diversity is huge. Iranians are not necessarily Arabs, although there are Arab communities living in Iran. But it's a mosaic of different cultures and different ethnicities kind of merged together. So you've got Kurds in there, you've got Persians there, you've got Gilaks and many other different ethnic groups. with distinct languages or dialects and beautiful, colorful culture. This is reflected in their beliefs, religious ideas. So we've got Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, Baha'is, and other religious minorities in Iran. For many years they have lived and survived together. I wouldn't say it's always been peacefully. Many Christians have been suppressed centuries ago and have lived with these very siloed communities, so that they preserve their own script and their language, but very much isolated from the rest. This was completely going in a different direction before the Islamic Revolution in the Pahlavi era, but with seriously speedy advance in technology and economy and everything brought the more conservative layers of the society to surface. It became very concerned. The language of opposition to modern lifestyle was a Marxist ideology. The mixture of Islamist ideology and the Marxist ideology was quite toxic, and that was what brought the Islamic Revolution into existence, which has crippled the Iranian economy, has downgraded its cultural heritage, and brought so much misery to people from all walks of life that you could see it now coming to boil.
Yes, the history of the Persian people from Cyrus the Great. I have a promotion of an article I wrote on the book uh, that I read on Cyrus. Interesting history, and then of course the Shah, who and his father before him, who there. You've had a history, Iran, of of a kind of constitutional system and constitutional monarchy, obviously. And then the Islamic Revolution comes in, and it's interesting that you said that there's a kind of a Marxist element to the Ayatollah's rule. I had not seen that before. And how do you see that played out? Is it in a centralized economy, or how does that work?
First of all, an interesting pick up on the history. You mentioned Cyrus the Great. In fact, if you ever go to New York and walk into the UN building, you see this transcript of Cyrus the Great cylinder, some recognizing it as the first declaration of human rights, where in biblical narrative, once he conquers Babylon, it allows people that were captives to go back to their home, rebuild their religious and community life, and allows them freedom that was quite unlike many of the other conquerors in those times. And throughout the Iranian history, when especially after the conquest of Islam and Islamization of that part of the region, this identity has always been in conflict, being an Islam Muslim and being an Iranian. And during the reign of Shah, he tried to restore that national identity based on the history of Achaemenid Empire and Cyrus the Great itself. And this brought a lot of conflict with those who were strongly emphasizing the Islamic identity of the Iranians. And this had given them quite a prominent place in the Iranian society. They were the ones who were gatekeepers when you would go to the judges. Your educational system was based on madrasas, or the schools, the Quranic schools. They were the ones who would basically have to sign off any laws to make sure they're aligned with the Islamic jurisprudence. And now, with this modernization, all that had been taken away from them. So they felt basically their power base is weakened. And they borrowed the language of Marxists to use that against what they call capitalists. Even democracy was seen as a heathen idea where the laws are dictated by God, not decided by ordinary people. So This was a conflict during the constitutional revolution happening over 100 years ago in Iran, where the clergy were completely against it for this very reason. But this tensions grew until it led to the 1979 revolution. Since then, of course, they tried to disown this Marxist linkage. Nevertheless, you see there.
The fact that the Shah was a profligate spender and had, so much wealth probably played right into the hands of the Ayatollahs as well, correct?
Yeah, it's true. He was a spender, but this was an easy target. What he did mainly to forge a new Iranian identity, basically deprive the clergymen of a privileged position they held in society for centuries, and that brought his downfall.
Right. Now let's talk about the neighborhood because when this war broke out, people were surprised to see missiles going to Qatar and to Dubai. And when you start to look at the map, you see that Iran is surrounded by any number of totally different cultures. You have Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan to the north. The Turks in in Turkey and in Azerbaijan, and there's a tension between Azerbaijan. I see that there. Talk about some of the surrounding countries and what the strategy could be to be attacking those neighbors.
Well, since the 1979 revolution, the new leadership of Iran, supreme leaders Ayatollah Khomeini, tried to incite revolt in countries like Iraq, which kind of led to the tensions eventually to the 8-year war between Iraq and Iran. Iraq is predominantly Shia country, yet it used to be run by a Sunni ruler, that's Saddam. Whereas Iran thought this, they have the potential now, they have victoriously managed to overthrow this monarchy regime, and this could be done in any number of other countries. So this was quite an alarming thing for the neighboring countries. And they sent messages to Iran trying to stop them from this rhetoric and interfering in their political life. But this just continued and led to Iraq trying to invade Iran. And that was a standoff for 8 years of war. And these Shia-Sunni tensions have been there for many, many years, for centuries, especially since the Safavid Empire over 500 years ago. The tensions with Ottoman Empire, which now consists of Turkey, and with their influence in also Azerbaijan and elsewhere. This has been there. So you got one dynamic out there, the Sunni-Shia conflict. But there's also the exporting Islamic revolutionary ideology, which the Iranian government proudly presents, especially through the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's nothing to do with Iran. They're to preserve and advance the Islamic Revolution elsewhere. And if they have any involvement in Iran, is to preserve that power base, which is supposed to do this. So it's natural to see them trying to interfere in the matters of Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, anywhere that there are groups of Shias, to resource them, militarize them, trying to take over the governments in those countries. So basically building a Shiite Islamic empire. That's why they're in nature a very imperialistic ideology.
Within the country itself, you have a growing silent percentage of people who have committed to Christianity over the past couple of decades. That seems to be growing, as I'm aware and you're aware of. it's very difficult to put a percentage on that. But there's also been a sort of a growing middle of people who, to my understanding, have lost faith in this radical Islam, and so they're either highly moderate or even, you might even say, becoming atheistic or agnostic. What do you know about the spiritual condition or the faith condition of the Iranian people in general?
I always say the first victim of the Islamic Revolution in Iran was Islam. The way that the Islamist revolutionaries behaved right from the first day, and put many people who were genuinely committed to Islamic faith on their back feet in kind of defending it, and they're therefore justifying it. It became even more difficult. And over the years, it's not just been murderous activities that they have done, they've carried on against their own population, but also abroad against any dissent. It's also the corruption, the total loss of moral base has led to this deterioration of this place of Islam, particularly Shia Islam, and they've become much more narrower and narrower in their circle of basically aligned population with the rhetorics of the regime. So they become more exclusive. People who do not share absolute loyalty, 100% loyalty to the ideology of the regime, are excluded, outlawed, and many of them face prison or exile. So therefore, disillusionment has been very much acknowledged, especially since 2020, when at least one scientific survey carried on by some university professors who showed that majority of the Iranians actually have different views than Shia Islam. I think it was 32%, if I'm not mistaken, around that region of 30%, that identified themselves as Shia. The rest were either agnostics, atheists, consider number identified themselves with Zoroastrianism, that's the ancient Iranian language, and also 1.5% identified themselves as Christians. If you extrapolate it with the number, with the sample size, it comes about 750,000 to 950,000, somewhere between that.
Now, I've heard estimates that number is quite a bit higher, but so you're looking at the low end of the estimates on that.
I'm looking at the low end. That still is an incredible number. 750,000. This is while the number of Christians in Iran prior to Islamic Revolution was only 300,000. And the force of migration and many of the Armenian and Assyrians leaving the country has reduced their numbers to less than 100,000, while the country's population has doubled. The number of traditional churches and Christians have dwindled down to 100,000. Yet you've got the 700. So what's the gap between the 100,000 to 750,000? This is the lowest estimate. That is converts to Christianity, which is incredible when you live in a country where there is fear of losing your life, your liberty, and your livelihood, all of that for choosing to exercise your right to freedom of religion belief. Yet this is an act of faith first and foremost for many of them. They don't describe it as civil disobedience, but it's also a civil disobedience against what I call it a religious apartheid, a state of complete totalitarianism. People choose what they believe and how they want to exercise it. We close down our churches, we go to home churches. You don't allow us to worship, we gather together and pray. breaking the law in every instance, but they exercise their freedom.
The so help me understand how has I understand the violence, but how has the leadership, the Ayatollahs, this group of the supreme leader and his cardinals or his group underneath him there, how it simply can't be, or perhaps it is, simply the threat of violence. How have they maintained control? How have they managed the country in such a way that they've been able to be relatively stable, considering how unpopular they have become?
I think they have very well studied various movements, historical movements, and other countries that have held on to power. They've utilized everything in their disposal. They have had complete control over countries' resources. So right now, despite the fact that Iran is one of the richest countries in the world with so much resources, yet they have fed that to more advancing their ideological purposes, and rather than spending on ever impoverished population. They have used military to crack down on any form of dissent. They have tried to control the media. The supreme leader is ultimate in charge of the army, the media, and country's policies and the laws that are made. Everything works towards one purpose of maintaining and advancing this ideology. So while we use in terms like Iranian government, there's actually no government. You got another sultanate. You got an ultimate rule of a person. And right now the new Iranian supreme leader is supposedly chosen. People have to go and pledge allegiance to him. If you don't, you're on the wrong side of the history in their view. So it's, when I say totalitarianism, that's what I mean. It means every aspect of your life had to align with how they determine.
There would be very few communities which would be better connected than the Christian communities within Iran. You are part of that. So, what are you hearing from people within Iran as to the emotional state of the population? I know this is highly anecdotal, but what sort of feedback are you getting from what the people are going through right now?
Well, as you know, since the war started, communications has become really challenging. Few and sporadic messages get through. Yesterday, brief moments, some phone calls could have been made. The general sense in terms of emotional state of the population is, you could describe it in two words: fear and hope. Both are present at the same time. And one news can lead to both emotions being experienced. Hope, first of all, fear of not just bombed. In fact, I've seen incredible images when people are out observing the bombing as if it's happening in another country. Well, it could be just 200 meters from where they stand. And that's how they believe in this precise targeting of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard infrastructure. But they fear more about the continuation of this regime. Fear that this system will continue to survive, or possibly deal would break between the parties in the conflict, and this would lead to further losses for them and for their families. They fear this war may be prolonged, and everything they have piled up with food and resources to carry themselves through this difficult time will finish. They're fearful of the jobs they have already lost, and more job losses will come at the end of this war if this regime continues to remain in power. They're fearful of being scapegoated. They're fearful of They're prisoners. Many thousands of Iranian protesters, early January protests, are still in prison, and they feel some sort of revenge, retaliation against them. There's been many occasions when they have threatened the population, their own population, that if we go down, we take everyone down with us. And that you see in how they're throwing missiles and drones against neighboring countries, see how they would act towards a defenseless population in Iran. I've seen images, videos of clergymen in mosques, arms. They visibly have AK-47s, showing them off and encouraging the faithful in the mosque that if anything happens, this is how you would need to defend street by street, and basically threatening general population not to rise up in the aftermath of this war. So those are their fears, but they also have hopes. And if I may just briefly talk about, because I was speaking to one of the colleagues, he said the hopes are actually much greater than the hopes, the fears. They have hopes for a brighter future, obviously, that this regime will be gone and no more of this totalitarian regime that tries to control every aspect of their life. They're hopeful that there will be international investment, a boost in the economy, more jobs, that the younger generation wouldn't have to dream about a life, but they could actually live it in their own homeland rather than immigrating to have a life. They have a hope for a renewed sense of pride in their national identity, for their regained dignity, and also reduced tensions with the rest of the world, with their neighbors. And this is the aspiration. These are the hopes that keeps them alive during the bomb. Short messages just reads, please pray, this will be over soon, but the way we want it, not the Islamic Republic.
Amen. Let it be so. Well, thank you so much for this time we've had together. How can people find out more about Article 18?
Well, they can go on our website, article18.com. It's all letters, no digits. And they could also sign up for the monthly newsletters that comes with the most urgent news and updates. Christians, we invite them to adopt one of these prisoners of conscience, Christians who have been arrested and detained simply because of practicing their faith. It gives them immense hope to know that they're remembered, they're not forgotten. And there are many different ways that we ask them to engage when there is an opportunity for public advocacy. We ask people that are adopting these prisoners to actively get engaged and feel they have a part in bringing freedom to the oppressed.
I love that. I love that idea. Adopt a prisoner in Iran. Pray for them. Help them. Thank you, Mansour. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Much appreciated.